Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhaj of Authentic Living with Roxanne. Thanks for tuning in again today. I have Mr. Paul Gunn. Hi, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Roxanne, for having me.
Thanks for being on. So Paul and I recently crossed paths because we both executive contributors to Forbes magazine, and Paul is a CEO of Co-op Corp, and I ran across him because, he had written this fantastic article that really kind of struck me around empathy. And as you know, I talk a lot about authentic leadership, leading from the heart, not focusing on the bottom line, but to focus on relationships. And when I saw this piece by Paul, I really thought I'd like to chat with him and see what he's all about. So we reached out and we had a little bit of a chit chat and realized that he would come on my podcast and we can have this conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Most of the bio will be in the show notes, so you can read further. He's developed a career around procurement, logistics, and supply chain. And he's skilled in with proven results as evidenced by the firms he's owned and by stellar delivery performance records of each firm. He has as a leading role in the firms he's owned. He's a servant leader, and what he's done is he led one of his former firm's largest quality management system implementations and certifications for multi-million-dollar sustainment maintenance programs for highly visible DoD and users. I don't know what DoD is, Paul. What is DoD?
It's the Department of Defense here in the United States.
So for anybody in defense, you're thinking, well, she really doesn't know defense, and it's so true. His previous firm was listed as one of Inc.'s fast-growing privately held firms at number 67. Mr. Gunn has held a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, from Georgia State University, and an MBA from the University of Phoenix. And he's the founder of Tusk Corporation.
Yes.
So that's, can I say that I really, have not met many people in defense. And so I was intrigued, especially when you wrote about empathy. But let's start with you and kind of who is Mr. Paul Gunn and kind of what your path has been. And we'll talk a little bit about you in leadership. So tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Roxanne. A little bit about me. I'm a kind guy. A lot of the stuff I do is based on empathy. My brother and I started the last company when he came back from war in 2006, and we got together and said, hey, let's go ahead and try and do something together. And that was part of that previous firm. So we had success doing it and having this leadership style with working with vendors and customers based on empathy. And it proved itself to really work. We were walking in an industry that it's not really necessarily known to always work from that standard. So after having success with that company, we transferred these same skill sets over from starting in this new company here. And it's been replicated for having a lot of success for us. It's a passion that I live by. And ultimately, we're trying to help the war fighters get home. When my brother was over there was a lot of times we were hearing different things, and you need good people and good supply chains to help our war fighters get home and allies. So my passion really is driven based on all the different family members that have service members serving, whether it's in the Navy, Army, Air Force, whatever they're doing to help that. Every day I wake up whether I'm feeling tired, sad, or whatever's going on, I know somebody's out there who needs to get this material and some family member who's hoping that they have what they need to get home. It's a great honor, and I take it real seriously. But a lot of the actions that help me succeed in doing that are founded on empathy and kindness, ultimately focusing on that purpose to get our warfighters home.
So did you grow up in a military family?
My dad was Air Force. Then he and some of my different uncles and cousins are as well. So for a large part, they are.
So you really understand that whole concept of going out there and what it takes, and like you said, were you in the war, or was your brother?
No, I wanted to go after into the officer, but I wasn't given the access to get in there. I think it was had plantar fasciitis in my foot, so that was what was denied when I went in as an officer. So all the time when he was out, this is the biggest piece I was looking for. I just wanted my brother to be safe, and what is it going to take for him to get home? So when he came back, that really was the mission, saying, how can we help and work together so we can help others and that we're feeling the same way I was. And it's just taken off.
So obviously as a family member or growing up in a family that's, with the military, you understand, I think of all the things that your family has to go through when your brother's there, you're there, and, you're worried. I would think I've never had a sibling that's been in that situation, but I would think that when you kind of think of your role, right, and making sure that you said people get home, how do you think that through, right? Because I'm thinking if my brother's away and I'm worried and, he's probably got a family and your mom and dad and, all that's a lot of emotion that's wrapped around what you do for a living, right? It's not just about, A plus B equals C, which is, kind of the supply chain. It's you're thinking about it from a different depth.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you want to go out, and what will happen is in a normal situation or circumstances where I may have laid back and said, fine, I'll just let this be. You actually have to go in and push harder and have a vendor understand, look, I understand this is not the normal way you're doing it, but what this is, it requires people to get home. So can you put aside your personal feelings or however you may do different policy and make an exception here? Because other than this, you choosing to not want to work with me based on a formula, a procedure, or a policy is not going to help. I am the messenger in this situation that's trying to get other people home. So there's certain circumstances I'm put in where you have to move to the forefront and get people to really align with the greater good for getting the warfighter home. And I'm speaking usually in that position from experience, having been on the other lines. I just want my brother home. I want my family member home. And I know there's plenty of other people who have honor and respect for our military and those serving that they feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. So it's deeper, right? Like, yes. So it's an outcome, but really the outcome is to get people safely home.
Yes.
With certain things that they might need. So give me an example of something, that you've kind of like a story you remember, like when you were trying to kind of land something. Because I
can speak to that. There was a time interesting. We had a project where we had to do, and the recipient of that project was on one of those different items. And once they got back, they were helping us set up our Comcast in the house. So we got to talking. He was explaining he was a Marine. I said, oh yeah, my brother was a Marine. He said, oh, well, thanks. And then he asked kind of what we did. So I explained. And when it got down to what we were supporting that they were actually in, and he went on for 5 minutes, just over and over. I was in that saved my life. I just want to thank you, thank you, thank you. And here I am thinking I'm calling in to just set up Comcast. And the guy goes on for 5 minutes of ultimate thanks because he said he wouldn't have been home had we not done what was necessary to either get those parts to him. And there it just further pointed out these things matter when you're ordering and supporting the government, because there is a direct recipient who sat in what was involved what we were part of. And it really touched my heart to say, see, this is exactly what I was feeling. This guy is talking to me from, if had he not been in that, he wouldn't have his life saved.
So it's really, you look at the impact on people's lives. So let's, because it's one thing is that if you need a particular part, and I know nothing about these parts, but Paul, so stop me anytime before I sound really silly, but you're not looking at it as, say, you're looking at it as overall, how can I fit and meet the need to the best of my capacity to be able to get what's needed to get people home safely? And you're trying to do that in a kind, empathetic way.
Yes, because also sometimes people will be straightforward. They'll be like, well, I'm just not going to do this. And you'll have to make a connection to someone who I do have a relationship with. But when it does present itself to have that, I'm going in and having these conversations and making connections based on a genuine desire to, one, connect, to understand, and two, how is it going to help someone other than myself? And what seems to happen, people will align with that purpose on wanting to help others get home. Yes, yeah, they can have all the material they need and still be in situations that aren't going to save their lives. But if they have what they need, you're giving them a better chance to get home. And that is that purpose, saying that nothing's completely safe in this world, but why send someone where they shouldn't be without the things they need? So in doing that, most of my position on a desire to connect with people anyway is based on helping someone else first than it is helping myself. And that usually is well received. It hasn't always been, but it usually is. Some people just, it doesn't matter what you do or say to them.
It's bottom line to some people, right? It's like, what is the price point? And that's what I'm going to stick to. And they don't make the connection between the outcome that they're looking for and maybe the back end of the house, which is getting that, maybe that plane off safely, or they're just looking at price, and you're looking at it as overall getting these families, these men or women back home so that they can reintegrate back with their families. So what I hear a lot is about your deep value for the connection that you want to create, not just well, I'm sending these particular parts at this particular point to wherever they need it in the world. You're looking at, how do we do it fairly?
Yes.
And in the kindest way possible. But of course, you're also running a business at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
So you have to be competitive, but it's not all about price.
Yes, and sometimes that's collaboration. Sometimes if it goes and gets out to a point where price doesn't always make sense, people are always looking, for the most part, in business. If an opportunity fits that makes sense for them, sometimes that's collaborating with them or introducing them to somebody who aligns with their values for where they're going. So if you're going in to genuinely understand people and offer help to them, that is well received. They may not work with you or assist you on that current goal to help what I'm doing, but you're coming to the table with something towards them. And it's not, see, this is where I think people get that confused. Well, they're going to do it to get something in return. It has to be genuine where you're coming in. I'm going to help you whether you choose to help me or not. That is received different than I'm going to do this because I want something from you. And I feel people can sense that out. And quite frankly, if you do it, people are looking for the angle to say, well, what does he want? And when it's received as he's Drew or she's doing it because she genuinely is looking to help, that for the most part has been why I feel we've had success or we've built the relationships, because we usually won't ask for things in return for ourselves. It's for something greater than what we're doing.
A bigger purpose
Yep.
in people's lives. Now, tell me, at the level that you're at, and what does empathy in business mean to you?
So it was interesting. There's a research paper out. I would love to send it to you. It was from Cambridge University, and what they were talking about, sales people, there's cognitive empathy and then emotional empathy. And it's like the revenue can be driven in two different directions. It's a wonderful paper to read. Whoever did that, it's a first of its kind. So cognitive empathy really is trying to understand, from the way I took it, is trying to understand your customer, how you can help them, and make those decisions based on that. Because when you use emotion, the emotional empathy, you're going, oh, well, they feel this, they feel that way. You can make when they test it, you can make a bad decision based on how they feel. But if you're using how they feel and how to respond, the cognitive on how you're thinking to make the right decision best for them, you're going to have increased revenue and sales. So to me, empathy in business basically means, how can I help this person and show my genuine desire to want to work with them, give them a good product, help them, whether it's now or down the future. And I'm not looking for a one-time transaction. It is looking for a long-term customer, long-term relationship, business-wise, because those matter over time. People move, people transition, and wherever they go, those relationships stick.
And I'm gonna assume, Paul, that in your industry, it's not that big, is it? Is it a smaller subset of people that are suppliers to the military, or is there lots of companies competing for your business with Kuwok?
There's a fair amount, but we've kind of found a sweet spot in our space. There's a lot of service base. There's a lot of product base. You just have to know where in that you fit. But I think indirectly, commercial companies support defense companies one way or the other. Even if they're 5 levels down, they're supporting them. But for the most part, when a government opportunity does come out, you will have competition. You will have it, and it's fierce because there's a tendency to work with certain firms that are already in there.
Okay, to kind of with the incumbent versus looking elsewhere, kind of. So, at your level, for you to speak at this level, I think oftentimes we don't expect leaders, to be talking that way. So I think sometimes we assume that leaders they're not as empathetic. Like, we kind of think of leaders and senior leadership teams as being metric driven, right? Outcome based. Yes. And, this connection between, like you said, the emotional and the cognitive, oftentimes CEOs get looked at as they don't understand the feelings associated with what's needed by their employee base. Would you agree that a lot of CEOs are like that? Or would you say that a lot of CEOs or senior teams that you've been involved with understand the things that we're discussing around empathy?
I would say prior to COVID, it was limited. And it seems since after, it's opening people up to have a human side. I wouldn't say not all think like that, and probably the vast majority don't, especially when you get up to the large, very large businesses. So, from my experience and in my interactions, the ones that do, you make very good connections with. But yes, for the most part, up until then, they were few and far between.
Yeah,
it's
so
not
now
something.
I know the average person now is they're looking behind the house they're looking to see if companies are living the values that are in alignment with them, the consumer. Yes. We're seeing that a lot more, right? Like, people are wanting to buy more local. Like, I'm here in Niagara Falls, Ontario. I don't know if you know where that is. Like,
yes.
And people are wanting to be more localized now since the pandemic. Or if they are dealing with a bigger company, they want to make sure that company has the same kind of values with them in, compared to, like you said, prior to pandemic, it didn't matter. And now people are wanting to trust or experience trust with the companies that they're dealing with a lot more. So I think you're really, really right with that. So now I would say that a lot of senior leadership teams and senior leaders are having to think, well, if we weren't kind of being perceived as trusting, what is it that we have to do to change the projection of how people perceive us out there?
Yes. And see, so that gets back to that old theory where, why don't you do it when the times are good? So what's going to happen now? Are you going to change because your customers are doing it? Or are you going to change because that's the real premise from what's at the core? And this is where I say customers and consumers are going to weed them out, because now they're looking for it. So it better be something that you mean and genuine, or else they're going to call you out. This is a social media era. They will call you out. So I feel like it's good and is moving in the right direction because they're at least asking. So if they're starting to ask, they're going to start to put the right things in place, and people are holding each other accountable, and will move towards that.
For sure. How can leaders at your level become more empathetic? What kind of things, if you're, there's people listening and saying, oh yeah, Mr. Gunn, you're in a different sector or whatever, you don't understand our industry. What would you say for some leaders that maybe are starting to listen and realize that they maybe have to shift and increase their empathy? What are some basic things you would say to those leaders that are maybe listening and not sure how to kind of approach this?
I would say listen to their team. That's the biggest thing. You first start by listening. As they always say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's somebody sitting in somebody's CEO room, boardroom, that's quiet, that never says anything, that probably has an idea that can shift the company into the right trajectory, but nobody's going to ask them. They're going to continue to overlook. There are quiet, proficient team members that have ideas, but nobody speaks up, because no one genuinely asks, or they're fearful of the next level above them. They're going to either lose their job or outshine. And if a leader steps up and shows, I want to hear from my team, removing the titles because I'm focused on the ideas that can be brought, it is going to allow those other team members to step up and feel this is a safe environment for me to be able to speak and not worry about my position from the top or the next level being seeking to remove me because I asked a question that may be perceived that the next level person didn't think of before them. It has to start with a leader opening up and really meaning that.
For sure. So it has to start there. So you already said that one of the reasons you talked about being empathetic in business is that what it does is it opens doors, and the doors that it doesn't open, it doesn't matter. What else is important? Why is empathy? What are some of the other reasons why empathy is important in business?
I feel it's important because if, for example, you give the ones where some of the doors won't open, I would say those on that side are being empathetic. When they tell you they're not going to open it, they're telling you why. This product is what we do. This is our process. This is why we believe in it. However, most of those people will say, hey, however, we can have opportunities here. And when you just don't approach them from saying, well, fine, the deal's over and done, I'm going to leave it. When you look at ways to either ask them, well, how can I help you somewhere else? If it's not here, I didn't win on this deal. What can we do to help? You build a relationship there, and what happens is it may not be right away, it's down the road. You're going to find something that helps them. So if your desire to be empathetic is truly there to help, and you're approaching it from a collaboration in mind, whether it's now or down the road, you may help somebody else build their business or build that line that then in turn becomes an ally for you 12 months, 2 years down the road, and remembers the fact you helped make a connection that wasn't there because you weren't seeking just for your own good at that moment. So it's important to be that way from a cognitive and both emotional standpoint. You have to think strategy wise. You do have to understand, okay, you can't make decisions based, well, I feel this is a good person. I understand they're crying or sad or not in a good mood, so let me do this. You can't take it that way, but if you use both how they're feeling and what you're thinking on the product, you can align strategically to help them and yourself down the road. And it's not being a bad thing. You still have a business to run. You're trying to do it with all good intentions.
Absolutely. So tell me how, with your vendors and your customers, how do they receive, how has empathy been received? And kind of when you started your business, like you said, with you and your brother, what were some of the things, what did you have to do to kind of have people to, start dealing or scaling up with your business?
I think one of the bigger things with us was we were young. Brother was 26, I was 29. So we were showing up in places that necessarily people really weren't expecting young kids in their mind to show up. So a lot of times, and many times, people thought we were sent by our company. So the very few people that, and they would clearly voice how they felt about us being here. Well, you two guys don't know what you're talking about. You guys go over here. I'll get you a vendor. And then we would later have to re-engage with them on the either ordering process, and then their story changed. They were either being nice with us and trying to act as if they were showing that empathy, but they forgot who we were. Now, at that time, the people who did show empathy, those became the firms we align with. And what we found out, those firms that did that were truly what helped us grow, because their leadership from top down acted that way. Those leaders, those firms are what helped us grow fast, because from day one, they treated us with that level of empathy, and we made sure we did everything to align with them. And what happened was that alignment, because those firms had been built and established, put some of the other firms in line to help them come on board. And as it came known, people saw us the same that they saw us as we were younger. That really didn't change too much. This is who we were, and this is how we lived. But it was few firms at the beginning that actually showed it to us. So we made sure to align with them. But at first, we weren't perceived as belonging, and we made a mental note of that.
So when we kind of look at trust in business, right, and we look at the future of business, Paul, how do you see trust, like for companies, whether they're smaller startups or mid-size, or even companies that are scaling up? How do you think trust is going to impact us, let's say in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
I think it's a big thing. So many people have gone through hardship, but if they lost their job and they know of the excess done and had by larger executives and CEOs, I think as a mass, people want to be able to trust who they're dealing with, or at least showing to the best of their abilities, somebody's out there trying to do the right thing and making the right moves to help those and show genuine care. Nothing's perfect in the world, but it seems prior to COVID, there wasn't this mass popularity for wanting to make it known that this is how we're going to go, this is how we're going to move forward, and care for all our employees, the earth, everything is at the premise of what we do. These young kids are wise and intelligent, and they will call you out on half of this, and they're going to eventually be those that come into power and leadership roles, and somebody needs to show them that they can continue uniting and doing the good and still take leadership roles and have success. And I think that's a big gap where leaders just don't tell others, look, you can have success being like this.
Mm-hmm. So if you had 3 top tips for CEOs that are listening to this, what would be 3 top tips you'd give them about running a successful business? What are some tips you would give them?
I would tell them, 1, listen to your team. Identify that those quiet members who usually don't speak up in your room. Identify the workloads on when they're talking. Really actively listen. So if you ask a question, let them talk and hear. 2, align yourself with a global or some charity, something that's doing, an organization that's doing good in this world, to give back and really step up and mean it, and find out from your team. 3, what is it that matters to them, and why is their purpose aligned with their company? Where do they want to go? I love that mantra where they hire and say, how is this company going to help you get to the purpose that you want? Find out and let them talk and listen. You may discover what their time there is going to help them go 100% in, because they're going to go in and do what they have meant to do or been called to do anyway. Let them give their best time in your company so they can align with their purpose.
So alignment and really having people live their value. So if you're now, I know you had said that there was at the end, you said that you're founder to Water Tusk. What is
yes.
What? Tell me about that.
So that is a commercial company where we do a lot of hiking and camping gear. So it's based with tactical watches and everything on an e-commerce type of site. So we wanted to go out and do that, where funds made from that company were basically trying to give almost dollar for dollar support to noble causes for veterans and those in need. So I started that saying, hey, look, well, everything's going online and going digital. How do I set up another company? And that whole premise and purpose of that company really is to be, are you going to make money and grow it? But a lot of it is going to go back into helping others. So not necessarily is it a, what do you want to call it? Or a foundation or a charity, but more so a social responsible company. So any dollar that comes in, we give dog tags out to show, look, part of that cost to get the dog tag, and there's no disrespect to the military, is just showing, look, this aligns with us helping veterans, and this aligns with us helping the different charities that feed poor. And that's my biggest goal. The goal is every year, since did it, to raise up 200,000 to be able to give away. So hopefully this year we're able to do enough, but that's why that one was started.
Wow, amazing. So that values alignment, you put it back where it counts, and you give it back to the veterans or people that are coming back home, or any kind of issues that might come up. And obviously, like, you probably don't know this, but complex PTSD, or PTSD, is one of my specialties as a psychotherapist. So I really understand, when people reintegrate back in, Paul, how difficult it is, and, how much assistance families need, or guys or men coming back after they've been away, what it takes, and all the symptoms and all the things that maybe potentially you would understand from your family being in the military, what kind of things people go through, and depression and anxiety, being high when people are coming back and just trying to live normal lives again. So I think that's an amazing thing that you do. So you are living your value based on the industry that you're helping. And if for you, I think you're living the value, and I hope that other people in senior positions are listening, right? Because I think oftentimes a lot of people, and I will talk to people on this podcast, they're afraid to get up that level, and they only get up, they tell the senior people kind of what they think they need to hear, and they're oftentimes afraid to share really what's going on. And to your point, if you're not listening, truly, and not listening to the people that are the extroverts like me all the time, or maybe the people that are quieter that could bring so much value, you're missing a big part of the puzzle.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When I read that book, Extreme Ownership, it's one of my favorites. I really like the way the Navy SEALs and he put that book together. I read that from a position. People mistake that empathy is weak. Those guys got to go out and do their work. They need to trust each other, and they have to tell each other the hard truth. It's not somebody weak who has to sit there and tell you, look, I understand, I appreciate what you're doing, but we need to get this done and do it. I hear you. I sympathize, but for the better purpose and good of what we're all doing, this is why we need to go. And those are some of the toughest guys walking around. And I took it from the position, that's real empathy. It's like, look, I'm hearing, I see what you're saying. Let's consider this. Those guys have each other's back. That takes a unit that listens to each other. That's not a head person in charge saying, it's my way or the highway. That's a group of guys or team members and women that are working together for something bigger. And if there's not a better example than that, I don't know what is. Like I would not want to go out anymore from that without somebody understanding the reasons why or listening. That you're putting everyone in danger, and that's just from the outside looking in. So what's different from a leadership role? Listen to your team.
Yeah, they bring value, and you're only as strong as the people that you're connected to on your team. Absolutely. So thanks so much for your time, Paul. This has been amazing. And Paul is stretching himself, talking to me on this podcast. You've been phenomenal. For any senior leaders listening out there, we are now being, I would say, called to really live our values, and living your values at the front end. Systemically, we know the power you make change from the top. So think of your role and think about what frontward facing message are you putting out there, and how is that backed by the values of your employees behind you. And with that in mind, with that concerted, thought out perspective, what you are going to do is you're going to grow people around you, and then everything else takes care of itself. So again, Paul, thanks so much for your time, for everyone listening. If you're needing anything on authentic leadership, please reach out to me at roxannedurhodge.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.